It's Combine Week, and Matt Williamson will be there. What does he expect to see? What is the media responsibility there? And what players to watch? Who has the most to gain at the NFL Scouting Combine? Coming at you right now.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. We love all the everydayers, and we love everyone who subscribes on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. And next time we reconvene, Matt, you will be in Indianapolis.
Yes.
And you will be podcasting from a hotel room, and you'll be eating shrimp cocktails, and you'll be rubbing elbows with the anonymous scouts out there. So I can't wait to hear what the buzz is in Indy when you do get there.
Yeah, and it's honestly one of my favorite weeks of the year. And maybe I'll just give you a kind of a week in the life of what Williamson does at the Combine, which is pretty similar to the other media folks, except I'm not a reporter. You know, I'm not interviewing people. I'm not at the podium with a microphone when these guys go up, or, GM speak, coaches speak, all that kind of stuff. But it's pretty cool. I mean, three of us drive together because it's about a 5.5 hour drive when we stop for lunch. Get there on Monday, and I don't really have any responsibilities that day. But the folks that I go with have to get there in time for Omar Khan, the Steelers GM, his speech or his time at the podium. All these different GMs have different times, and he happens to be on Monday. So we're going to get there a little earlier this year, knock that out. But then Steelers Nation Radio, every team has their own broadcasting service, radio station, and I work for the Steelers, and they're on 8 hours a day, for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And I'll do 2 different 2-hour stints while I'm there. So I'll be on half of the time. You can listen to that on Steelers.com, or I think we're going to YouTube my sections because I'm so good looking. Not everyone's going to be on YouTube. Sure. Gorgeous face here. But I will do that, get a lunch in between, maybe definitely talk to you at some point, either right after I'm done for the day or at, the midpoint somewhere in there. Go back to the room, do a little bit of work, maybe take a little nap, go out to an awesome dinner, go to the bars, and you will see everyone in the entire league there, to be very honest with you. The Cowboys bus will be parked on one of the main drags. There's only a handful, more than a handful, but there's certain spots that you're going to see people. Like, I mean, not to throw them under the bus, but it shouldn't shock anybody. I was walking home from the bar one night, and there's Andy Reid at Steak and Shake at like 1:30 in the morning with a shake and a huge burger. Right. That's like not uncommon at all. You'll just pass in the hallways, go into the convention center or whatever, an owner, or, a coach, whatever. So it's a blast. Steelers take care of me, take me to 2 good dinners, that kind of thing too.
Speaking of dinners, what's the over-under for combined whiskeys and steaks for Williamson for the week?
Ooh, definitely 2 big steaks. There's a deep dish pizza place we go to every year. Ooh. So that's one dinner that will be on the Steelers tab from, my per diem type of thing, but nice. Out of pocket originally. Whiskeys are big, don't get me wrong, but whiskey's more sitting in my couch upstairs on a Tuesday at home.
Okay.
I'll be doing Belvedere martinis straight up when the Steelers are paying, and then go to red wine probably. I mean, at the nice places. And then we'll always cap it off at some sports bar or whatever, slugging down a Miller Lite like the common thug.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, right.
So we're talking 47 is the over-under. I'm placing it right there.
Not on whiskeys, but on overall drinks. Yeah, that's a pretty good Vegas line.
Whatever they put the line at, I'm taking the over on that one. And hopefully we get some nice stories. And that's why you get so many good stories there too, because you pull up a Barstool and you're next to somebody and lubed up a little bit, and you get some nice storylines coming down from the combine in Indianapolis. I'm looking at the schedule.
The thing that's really cool too about what we do, like I mentioned, there's 32 teams. We all have a table. We all have a setup. Pro Football Focus might have a table. ESPN might have a table. So maybe there's 40 of them total, something like that. But we're one of the only teams that are live coverage for 8 hours straight. Some of them just like get an interview here and there, and then they kick their feet up. So we do it a little bit differently. So in order to fill time, like Matthew Berry joins us every year. Dane Brugler joins us every year. A lot of these people that many would know, they walk by and we grab them. Cynthia Freeland joins us every year, so it's great. You get some really big time people in the business sitting there chatting with us.
Schedule wise, obviously there's a lot of interviews and there's weigh-ins that happen earlier in the week, but just a reminder to everybody out there what the schedule is, because it's a slow play on the actual on-field workouts, and it gets me every year. You got to wait until Thursday before we actually get those workouts happening, when you get 40 times and all that. So D linemen and linebackers start as well. So the fast guys don't even run until the weekend. And so actually the DBs used to go last. They're going second this time. So we've got,
I think O-line's last this year.
Yeah. So we got,
I'm not sure why they changed that around, but
yeah, that's interesting. Defensive linemen and linebackers going first. They're going to work out Thursday. Then you got DBs and tight ends Friday, and the weigh-ins are usually the day before. So, we'll get numbers late in the week for a lot of that stuff. Then you got quarterbacks and wide receivers who obviously have to work out together. That's going to be Saturday. And then offensive linemen are finishing it up. So we got D first, then offense second. Offensive linemen finish it up. Their on-field workouts are Sunday.
So part of the reason it gets people screwed up is the last thing the players do is work out. They've been there for a couple days before they're on NFL Network or whatever, running 40s. They come in, they do height and weight, the underwear stuff. They do interviews the whole time they're there, basically, except for the on the field day. They do all their medicals, which is a very long day that they hate, to be honest with you. You're poked and prodded and pulled in different hospitals and bod pods and all that nonsense. So really, a lot of these guys are pretty exhausted by the time they actually work out. Like one of my jobs when I was with the Browns was a small job, but I had to get all the tight ends up and ready, woke them all up, went to all their rooms. I was like the mother duckling. They get them all walking to the right place. I didn't have any other job except just get them there. And they were all grumpy as can be, sleeping in a new bed, barely got any sleep. Like, it's a vigorous few days for these dudes.
And that's why a lot of prospects, you think, oh, why didn't so-and-so do this event or do this? And it's like, it's a lot put on you. So unless you're prepared and really feeling good about the events, then you're just not going to do them.
Yeah. I mean, if you have a slight cold or anything, I mean, you could show really bad over those couple of days you're in Indianapolis, or something tragic happened in your family, or, like, it's a little unfair, like you barely sleep and it's not your best day.
Or like Reuben Foster, and you just can't stand sitting there at the hospital anymore waiting for the medical checks, and you just have a freak out, and you're ruining your draft stock and costing yourself millions of dollars because you just can't hang with the schedule and the pressure of all of it. So a lot going on at the combine, and a lot riding on this for a lot of young men out there that are getting ready for the 2024 NFL draft. Who has the most to gain? Some players we are especially going to be looking for at different positions. And the combine is going to be big for cluster busters this year with some certain position groups, especially early in the draft. And one quarterback in particular, J.J. McCarthy. We'll get to all of it next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's right, $150. Just free money to play with. If your bet wins, your first bet, that is, at FanDuel, bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props. And I know the NFL season is over, but we're talking combine. We're talking NFL draft on today's episode. Draft props. So much fun at FanDuel. And, of course, all the NBA bets you can imagine. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Let's start quarterbacks. And I know one of them you wanted to talk about, Matt, is JJ McCarthy. And really, for me, the big question is, where does he belong? Where does he belong in the draft? And how does he look physically next to the other quarterbacks that we already know are going to go very high in the NFL draft?
I mean, obviously the huge talk like 1 year ago is how tall and how big is Bryce Young going to be, or Kyler Murray when he came in there too. Is he going to hit 5'11", or is he, what are the magic numbers they could get to? And they chug 8 gallons of water and put rocks in their pants to, whatever, just to get the 200 pounds. But McCarthy's a little on the small side. I mean, some of these guys' builds are I think, going to go a long way for these quarterbacks. They're not a lot of hulking Will Levis looking dudes, I mean, including Caleb Williams, I mean, and Jaden Daniels as well.
I think that's an underrated storyline. Sorry, I know we're talking about
it is
more, but underrated storyline because Drake May has a lot to gain by showing off a big arm, being big, strapping, versus Caleb Williams is not the biggest guy. And Jaden Daniels is skinny. Like he needs to make sure he weighs over 200 pounds, and he's a fifth-year senior too, and he's a really skinny guy. And if you're going to run a lot in the NFL, his build is very similar to what we saw with Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, and Lamar Jackson's very wiry, strong, and avoids contact really well. I don't know if Daniels
does not. He's terrible at avoiding contact. He has some of the biggest highlight hits against him that I've seen in this class. So yeah, that's big. You want to make sure your quarterback's sturdy and can handle the rigors of playing in the NFL.
Yep. And we did talk about this last week, but this is one of the times in the NFL calendar where the media and the draftniks and the people we read start to get a better pulse of what's been going on in NFL buildings too. Because leading up to the combine, it's one of the few times where scouts are in at their respective teams. They're putting together an off-season plan. Who are we going to look at in particular? What kind of questions are we going to ask Johnny or Freddie or whatever? But from all accounts, McCarthy has a lot to gain here because he doesn't throw the ball a ton at Michigan. He doesn't have he's not a 6-year player like Penix or Nix or some of these dudes, but he's considered a phenomenal teammate, leader, interviewer, and he's also should test really, really well. So people are expecting his momentum to really pick up here.
Yeah, you get the vibe that he's going to come out of Indy the clear top 4 quarterback.
Yeah, I agree.
And he's got a good arm. He needs to show that off, and he needs to be able to hang or even exceed expectations with the arm. And if he's really good on the whiteboard, great in interviews, I mean, you can really help your stock if you're JJ McCarthy. And I think it was maybe Daniel Jeremiah. Somebody compared him to Alex Smith coming out of Utah.
Okay,
not necessarily the NFL player, but the prospect. And I kind of like the comp. And you might think it's a slight. Alex Smith went number 1 in the draft.
Number 1 in the draft, and was a very good athlete.
Being Alex Smith as a draft prospect, right? So
that was the year I was with the Browns. Actually, I watched a ton of Alex Smith. We had the 3rd pick, and he went first.
What was the conversation in that draft room about Aaron Rodgers? How'd you screw that one up, Matt?
To be honest,
yeah,
we had the Browns in that year had a better grade on Aaron Rodgers than they did Alex Smith.
Yeah.
We just had Braylon Edwards as our number 1 player in the whole draft. So if we would have taken a quarterback, Browns fans, it would have been Rodgers, not Smith.
There you go.
Yeah.
One quick thing about weigh-ins too is if you took every single prospect and their listed college height weight,
oh man,
if you took off an inch and added 10 pounds, it'll be a lot closer. So don't be surprised when all the 6'1" guys are 5'11 and a half. And don't be surprised when the guys are like, oh, I don't know if he's, if he's a linebacker, he's, 220. I don't know if he's going to be big enough. He'll show up at 235. So don't worry about it. Because
I'm not even sure if it's
weight you can change, height you can't.
Exactly. Height's the big one. And I'm not even sure it's worth mentioning, but we probably have some new listeners. The oldest trick in the book is come to Indy all buffed up, looking great, and then don't run. And then your pro day, you lose 15 pounds and you run,
You don't weigh. Yeah.
You don't weigh in. Right. Yeah.
And you really get a feel of what guys are trying to do too. So a guy who's maybe an offensive lineman who's 345 pounds in college, he comes in at 320. And clearly, that's a big hurdle. He has to prove to teams that he's not overweight and he's not sloppy. And then the opposite, if you're a little guy, you want to be as big as possible. And so a lot of that is key. And some of the underrated stuff that people don't really think about, and I think it's obviously a lot more known now than it used to be, but arm length is so big, especially with those edge players and even corners. And if you're below the threshold for teams, you're immediately, if you're a corner, you're a nickel if you got short arms. Immediately, you're no longer an offensive tackle, you're a guard, right? And so those are huge parts of the measurements as well that people don't think about.
No, 100%. I mean, the biggest thing is medicals. Nobody thinks about that, but medicals are absolutely huge. You do take drug tests and things, and frankly, I think that was a bigger deal before the world realized marijuana is not the worst thing in the world for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no doubt.
You know, I think that's changed a little bit in terms of leniency and how they view those things. But still, you're getting tested, and not the smartest move to go in there and fail the test. So those are some things. Interviews are certainly important, but I've been in the interviews. I've been like 2 or 3 interviews that year I was at the Browns. They're so quick. I mean, it's 15 minutes. A horn blows. They walk in, you shake some hands, you smile a little bit, and someone makes a joke. And then before you know it, you have like 12 minutes left. And you ask some stuff, but then the horn blows and then they go visit the Bears or Raiders. There's a lot more in depth to learn from the in-house visit, when you get the visits there or talking to coaches, I think, than just these 15-minute interviews too.
So transitioning into some other positions, some other players to watch that could help themselves or potentially hurt themselves at the combine, Matt. I want to go to Brock Bowers at tight end. And obviously he's the number 1 tight end on the board for everybody. He's a great prospect. Love the tape, but there's a famous photo now that's making its rounds, and people are like, basically they show the photo of Brock Bowers standing next to Rob Gronkowski, and they're like, well, he's off my board in the first round. There he goes. And so it's big, 6'4", 230. If he shows up 230 and he's only 6'2.5", and he's not a specimen necessarily physically, he better burn, he better fly. I'm feeling it's more and more dubious, as good of a prospect as he is. I've seen him at pick 5. I don't know if he's that freak of nature tight end that can go that high, that a team can say, yeah, I'm going to draft this guy that high at this position. Yeah,
I think everyone knows. I mean, Darnell Washington did all the inline blocking last year. I mean, he was the big inline Y, and Bowers is just a, quote, weapon. Kind of like Dalton Kincaid, honestly, but I think Bowers had a much better career to much better program, so they're talking about him in the top 10 as opposed to third, the bottom third of the first round. But I do think the league is opening their eyes up to, when I was a kid, it was, Brady from Penn State or Mark Bruner. Like, those were like first round tight ends. You had to look the part. I mean, even Mercedes Lewis was 270 or whatever 100 million years ago, and he's still ticking. But I do think the league has kind of opened their eyes for a lot of teams want to get to 11.5 personnel. And what I mean by that is that last guy isn't the third tight or the second tight end or the third receiver. He's kind of right in between. But some teams will look at him and say, he can't block defensive ends. I don't want him.
Right. Yeah. So it depends organizationally how you're looking at him. Are you comparing him to wide receivers, or are you comparing him to Y tight ends, and you're going to ask him to do everything? And if you don't care about that, then you probably have him a lot higher. And speaking of wide receivers, our first little cluster of busting is the top 3 wide receivers in the draft. And is it such a slam dunk that Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be the top receiver in this class? Is it because of his famous last name that everyone's so willing to just put him there and forget about the rest of the rankings? And he might be a freaky tester, which will just solidify all of it too.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think Neighbors and Rome Odunze are more often than not the first receiver taken in most drafts, 8 or 9 out of 10. They're that good of prospects, but they're up against the superstar prospect, the transcendent one. And I don't use those words, very often, but I think he's the best since Calvin Johnson as a prospect that came out, including Jamar Chase, including some of these other stars. Randy Moss was there too, but he got in a little bit of trouble, so he didn't go in the top 3 or whatever. But I mean, talking about transcendent prospects, I do think Harrison stands alone. I've heard a couple of these draftniks say not every board in the country of the 32 have him number 1. I find that a little hard to believe, to be honest with you. I also think there's going to be a cluster of who is wide receiver 4 through 10 even. Like, there's so many good ones. But you also mentioned there's one thing I'm going to throw out there too is Bruce Feldman from The Athletic, before every college season, puts out his freak list, which is 100 of the freakiest athletes in all college sports. And I'm going to mention a couple of those names that'll be at the combine. His list is almost a year old now. It's before the season started. And it has, true freshman, sophomore, not all draft eligible folks. But Harrison was second on the list. I mean, the second freakiest guy leading into the college season last year. So whatever he chooses to do, I bet he'll do it well.
It's amazing too, because I saw our guy Keith Sanchez from the Locked On Podcast Network, Locked On NFL Draft.
I've been listening to him a lot lately. People should need to tune in. It's really good.
Great draft coverage, and they've been ingrained in this stuff all season long too. Where some of us like me don't watch college football that much during the season, and it's minor league football to me. So I'm diving into the tape and finding who I like now, just straight with draft purpose. I don't care anything about who's winning and losing college football games. But he compared Malik Neighbors, who I think is I like him a lot better than Odunze, and I know some people like Odunze. I'm a little worried about separation, but I think he'll test really well too, so he'll go high. But he compared Neighbors, who's 6 feet 200, to Steve Smith. Can you imagine a 6 foot tall Steve Smith Jr. or senior? It is, senior, right? So we got a taller Marvin Harrison in this draft. We got a taller Steve Smith, and we got the next Patrick Mahomes in this draft class. So that's a hell of a draft we got going on.
And Daniel Jeremiah compares Odunze to Larry Fitzgerald, which isn't bad comp either. Like
all of fame left and right.
Yeah, we got Frank Gore's kid in this draft. I mean, we got all good stuff going on, right? To his brother.
We got to. I mean, it's a family affair here. I love it. Okay. Next, more cluster busters. Some of our favorite players to watch at this year's combine. Next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by BetterHelp Online Therapy. And sometimes we all need to just talk things out, whether you've got something that comes up in your life that is big or small. It is so important to have all of those things covered. And a lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. So the question is, time for what? If time is unlimited, how would you use it? And what is the best way to squeeze that little bit of goodness out of that time that you need to in your life with family and school maybe, or work, or whatever it is that takes up the most of your time, and make sure you come out the other side knowing you utilize your time and thinking about the time that you had spent. And sometimes it's really helpful just to check in once a week with the therapist, make sure you're hitting the goals you want to. And a lot of that involves time management in your life every single week. So learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Offensive line is where I want to go next, staying on the offensive side of the ball. We talk about some defenders as well, Matt. This is a huge one for cluster busters. It's an awesome offensive tackle class, first of all, but there's such a pick your flavor variation. I think it's Joe Alt and Olu Fashanu are the top two tackles, and they've got all the athleticism as long as they don't fall on their face or you have bad interviews or, whatever it is at the combine, and medicals are all good. Those guys are going 1 and 2, and they're probably both going top 10. But after that, there's sort of a pick your flavor, big, athletic, raw guys. There's right tackles. There's left tackles. There's guys that might be a little bit better at guard, but could still play tackle. There's an awesome center in Jackson Powers Johnson. So the offensive line is key here. And Jackson Powers Johnson showed up at 330 pounds at the Senior Bowl. If he works out well, and you have to, if you're going to be a center and interior offensive lineman and go in the top 20 picks, where I'm seeing him getting mocked right now, you got to throw down in every aspect. And the best way to have great draft stock is go to the Senior Bowl, show out, go to the combine, show out. You got great tape and you're golden.
Yeah, he's super interesting because, like you, I watch more college football, but I'm looking, if I'm going to watch an Oregon game, who are the draftable players before I turn it on? And watching him, I'm like, boy, is he like 290? He moves extremely well, shoots out of his stance, changes direction in space, recovers well. Then he goes to the Senior Bowl, as you mentioned, he was like 334. I'm like, oh my gosh, so he absolutely could solidify first round standings. And I don't think I'm breaking any news from my hometown, but most of the Steeler fans that I know that are dialed into the draft think this guy's the next Pouncey, Dermontti Dawson, Mike Webster in black and gold. Like 20 is a magic number for him, and he could go earlier than that. The Rams just released the center, and their other one's a free agent too. He could go that early. I think that's 17.
Yeah, and that's why arm length measurements, are so important for a lot of these tackles too, because Talise Fuaga is a guy I did a deep dive on recently. And I think he's going to slide a little bit because he's going to get the guard treatment. And when you start looking at interior offensive linemen, are you going to draft Jackson Powers Johnson or a guy who's you're going to play at guard anyway, who might be a tackle in college like Fuaga, and Jackson Powers Johnson could play guard or center for you as well. So he's not like a center only prospect. So he's a fit for every team in the NFL. So those are huge. And I think that's what we're going to see with this cluster busters. And I have a feeling there's going to be some guys that are really good college players that can play right now and start for NFL teams that might go after some of these other dudes who are just alien physically, but have 1 year of tape and they're a little bit raw at offensive tackle.
Like Mims is really interesting. I mean, he's only played like 400 snaps or something like that because Broderick Jones was there, and
8 college games. He's played half a season.
College games, half a season, and he may be the biggest freak of them all. Like some of these offensive tackles, Guyton and Mims and Fashanu, who you mentioned. Mims and Fashanu, we have not seen since their last college game. They didn't go to the Senior Bowl, so people are kind of sleeping on them. But there are some extreme athletes. The dude from BYU, I mean, is a
Umalu, right?
I butcher his name. That's why I call him the dude from BYU.
Sorry, he's actually number 3 after
on the freak list.
On the freaks list, Kingsley Suamataya from BYU. Yeah, sub and look 6'8", you're running sub 4.5s, right? And so that's a big one. And look, when you're an offensive lineman, and we said it earlier last week when we were doing our mailbag, 40 times are more important for the big guys than the small guys. Like I'm tuned into the 40-yard dash times for offensive linemen more so than wide receivers. And I think it's more important of how good you're going to be in the NFL. And so that's huge for these guys. Another one was it Patrick Paul from Houston. Massive,
another one's freaky athlete,
really raw, but great athlete. He can push himself into round 1 as well, as long as he shows that he can move like an NFL tackle.
Yeah, some of these. I mean, this is a rare tackle class. I mean, including Alt and all these guys people know. But there's going to be 5 or 6 of them. If you're just watching on TV, you're going to go, "I want him." I don't know if he can, walk and chew gum, but I want him.
Right. I mean, that's what happens. You get the short arm tackle who ends up being a great NFL player, but you look past him, you're like, hold on, who's that guy over there?
I'll drink that guy.
6 arms. Yeah.
And that's because the coaches get involved too. I mean, the coaches are late to the show, and every coach says, "Give me that piece of clay, and I'll turn it into a." Yeah, I mean, I'm a great coach. Just give me that. I don't need the finished products with the short arms.
Any players to watch you're looking forward to seeing on the defensive side of the ball, Matt?
Yeah, I wanted to scroll through this freak list just to make some people, kind of aware. Chris Jenkins from Michigan is supposed to be much like Mazi Smith in the weight room and testing, which is tremendous. His father also played in the league quite well. The Bama outside linebacker, Chris Braswell, is 7th on this list. I mean, again, Chop Robinson, another edge guy from Penn State, is supposed
apparently
to be
Chop Robinson. He's a little undersized edge rusher, but apparently he's going to put on a show at the combine.
Yeah, I think he's going to put on a show. He kind of reminds me of like a Ndakwe. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a twitchy, leaner edge guy, but just I've watched him come off the ball. It's really, really impressive. A guy I thought whose stock was ready to really, really climb, and people just say he's a safety because he's white. It's Cooper DeJean, but he's not going to test at all in this one. He's coming off an injury. So
he's not going to test?
I just heard that,
because he's got size, and I know he'd put up great explosion numbers and leaps, but man, throwing down a big time 40 would be huge for him. So I guess we're gonna have to wait to the Iowa Pro Day for that one.
Yeah, go to YouTube and look at his basketball highlights though, and don't tell me he's not athletic enough to play corner. He's one I wish we would have seen, but we're gonna have to wait on. So no, there's a lot of great ones. Byron Murphy from Texas is another one that's supposed to do freaky things, as a workout guy. So some of these top dudes are elite athletes and could really put on a show in Indy.
Jared Verse, edge rusher from Florida State. There's a lot of those guys, and if you want to be a first rounder at tackle or on the edge, you got to test like an alien too. So big week for those. And
another guy on this list is Peyton Wilson, the linebacker from NC State. Like, he is considered a phenomenal tester, but he's had multiple major injuries, so he might get flagged there. And as you kind of mentioned before, he has really short arms. He's 6'4", but he has really short arms, so he's kind of an T-Rex out there.
Ooh, a couple more on the defensive side of the ball. One is Kool-Aid McKinstry, because he's a smart player. He played as a freshman for Nick Saban in Alabama, a big-time recruit. And because of his name, I've known he's existed, even though I don't pay that much attention to college football. I've known who he was for 4 years. I don't think he's as big or fast necessarily as some teams might want, but he's a really good player. If he does show up over 6 feet and runs 4.4s, lock him into the first round. He's a really good player. Two more from the freaks list. Quinyon Mitchell. Quinyon Mitchell didn't come out of nowhere for a lot of people. Came out of nowhere for me because I don't watch Toledo football, but he's at the Senior Bowl. He was the best player there at defensive back. He's on the freaks list, actually, on Feldman's freaks list. So the teams know about him. He's a first-round corner all day long, I think. And then Baylor defensive end Gabe Hall, who's a beast, and he really caught my eye at the combine, and I didn't know he was a freaks list guy as well. He's a powerhouse. He's a huge defensive lineman, and might make himself a lot of money this week as well.
Yep. To kind of mix the testers and the cluster busters, I think corner is a little bit of a cluster right now with Kool-Aid and DeJean, and there's about 7 or 8 in that first round neighborhood. How do they kind of stack up against each other in shorts and underwear, doing W drills and change of direction stuff and jumps, and
Oh, one more quick name. Tennessee running back. I've been doing some work on recently, and he blows me away. He reminds me a lot of Raheem Mostert, Jalen Wright.
Fast.
4.3s for sure. And he's like 210 pounds. So he's not like one of the 190-pound guys that runs 4.3s. He's 210. He doesn't really play big, but that's why my comp for him was Raheem Mostert. And with so many teams running that style of offense, I could see him shooting up draft boards as well.
Okay. I knew he was fast. I mean, that's interesting.
So a lot of names to watch. Who are you looking forward to seeing this week at the Combine? If you got any questions for Matt, hit us up at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL, or drop a question in the YouTube comments. We're going to do our mailbag as well this week. Matt will be from the Combine, so can't wait for that sweet, sweet Combine buzz. And enjoy your shrimp cocktails, Matt.
Oh, I will. And St. Elmo's shrimp cocktail will light you up. You can actually get it on Amazon too. Their cocktail sauce. I've got it at home. Yeah. Beware.
Apparently it'll make your nose hair stand up. But I always mean to go to the Combine and never get there, so maybe I'm just gonna have to have it at home instead.
Yeah, it's worth it. It's not quite the same experience, but it does the trick.
Thanks everybody for listening. Matt and I back tomorrow. Matt will be in Indianapolis. We'll talk to you then right here, Peacock and Williamson.